and tribes that went on to form great nations.
Again, this is absolute nonsense, because when you look at history, prior to the Industrial Revolution, they had periodical famines, an extremely high death rate across the entire world. And actually part of that reason was the free rider problem caused by communal ownership of farming. In other words, that's what caused mass starvation, the centralisation of agriculture. What solved the problem, what was a solution to the problem, was the private individual ownership of farming, in other words agriculture, and that was done through what we call the enclosure movement. Now this didn't just happen in the United States of America or what was to become the United States of America. This was of course something that happened in Great Britain. And isn't it funny how we've not seen a famine in Great Britain ever since? You talk about how these tribes built such great nations. Well, that's absolute fantastic. Fantastic because when you even go as far back as the Roman Empire, it was built off the back of slavery, violence, war, basically imperialism, emperors seeking to conquer other nations, and eventually it came to a crashing end. We really didn't see a dramatic change in the difference between the aristocracy and the poor people until the Industrial Revolution. And this is why we know you talk crap.
And that built huge empires that spanned the globe.
You mean the type of empires that seek to rule the globe by the use of force and violence, slaughtered countless thousands of innocent people, went in and used the means of force to force their will upon other nations, and you think that's good? You think something like the Roman Empire was something good?
The West rose up not because of individualism, but because of cooperation.
Individualism does not mean there is no cooperation. How the hell did you even draw to that conclusion? Who taught you about individualism? I really want to know who the hell taught you about individualism. If you had no cooperation in a free market economy under extreme individualism, there would be a serious problem. There's cooperation with businesses all the time that work in partnership with each other.
Because when we, as Western folks, stood together, we achieved so much more than an individual ever could on their own.
So is that why for century after century after century after century, living under your collectivism, right up until the Industrial Revolution, people were living in mud huts, living in what we called hovels, living in extreme poverty, with an extremely high death rate across the entire world, where the aristocracy owned most of the wealth and there was only 10% wealth for the middle class and working class. Yet as soon as individualism came along, all of that began to change. So much so that by 1850, the aristocracy only held 30% of the wealth, middle class moved up from 8% of the population to 58% of the population, and yet moved from 10% wealth up to 50% wealth, and yet there was the working class. The working class jumping from 10% wealth up to 20% wealth, cutting down from 90% of the population down to 40% of the population as the working class moved up the ladder into the middle class. So despite the fact that the rich got richer and poor got richer within individualism, and we saw the living standards dramatically improve across the entire world, and saw the dramatic improvement in life expectancy and living standards in Great Britain, you sit there and tell me that it wasn't because of individualism.
We formed what were close to being perfect societies, which I defined in my book as follows, and I quote, "The perfect society can be defined as a homogeneous group of people who come together with shared morals, shared values, and wish to move forward as one, working together for the good of the community."
Again, this is another example of history contradicting you. It was rather quite the opposite of what you're trying to speak of. People's lives were miserable. In fact, the words of a French revolutionary in the late 18th century said in his own words, happiness is a new idea in Europe. Why do you think the French revolutionary figure said that? He said that because life prior to the Industrial Revolution was simply miserable. And you're trying to paint it as if it's something out of Lord of the Rings before the big, dark cloud came over the top of them. If you like my video, feel free to comment in the comment section below, like the video, share the video, favourite the video or whatnot. If you've got any questions of that, feel free to ask me in the comment section below and I'll be sure to get back to you. But the rest of the video is just more or less the same of what he's going on about, and he really hasn't got a clue about individualism or collectivism, so to speak, and that pretty much proved it. Thank you for watching. Cheers.